Good afternoon, guys, or good morning, if that's when you're able to catch this video. Welcome to this week's edition of Signal with Snorlax, brought to you by Because Bitcoin, as well as me, Snorlax. Some of you might know me as Tommy if you watch Market Check. I'm making it a running joke at this point that every time I do these shows, it's a red day, a deep red day, and we sell off pretty strongly. So I will try, as always, to avoid being overly bearish. I'm going to try to keep it as evenly keeled as possible. Hopefully you guys are combating the price action that we're seeing right now, able to make some money at the very least, seeing some good chances for capital preservation. I mean, hey, maybe you were catching some of the altcoin pumps from over the weekend, right? We had some dinos move pretty aggressively. I've got them on my watch list. We should definitely talk about them. But really, I wanted to talk about the broader altcoin market because I mean, we've really had, I feel, almost like this shrinking pool of capital that plays altcoins, despite the fact that we've seen Bitcoin, Ethereum, and even Solana at times over the last year catch that institutional bid, a different source of external liquidity coming into those markets. Certain altcoins haven't quite had that, right? And we've kind of seen that, in addition, I think, to the dilution that we've seen on Solana, really kind of play a heavy hand with a lot of the performance of these altcoins. That's not a new concept, right? But we're all kind of asking ourselves, is it over for altcoins? Should I still be holding altcoins if I'm holding anything at all? Or, are we going to still see that altcoin super cycle that's going to play out with Bitcoin and ETH potentially entering these major long-term adoption cycles? So I'm just going to talk about a few tickers today. We're going to talk about the pair charts, and then obviously, how majors fit into that whole equation too. And then also when we can expect to see that altcoin performance potentially in the future. So let's get into it. I won't talk about Bitcoin too much today. I usually talk about Bitcoin a lot, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that Bitcoin really doesn't look the best here. Pretty clearly, this is, I think, the last line in the sand if you want to be bullish on Bitcoin here. So obviously it has to hold. For me, I'm less concerned about picking the bottom on a lot of these altcoins because, throughout the market cycle, we've had multiple instances where majors bottomed and then alts went on to continue bleeding into new lower lows over and over and over again. So I'm going to wait to that extent to bid a lot of these altcoins, or at the very least to kind of fill some long-term bags. Obviously, I have some favorites, and I will talk about one of them. You probably already know which one it's going to be, though, right? Hyperliquid, if you know me. But yeah, Bitcoin's got to hold this level, or from the standpoint of, do I want to be in an altcoin? Do I want to be in an altcoin to the extent that I care about the relative strength or weakness against Bitcoin? Well, if Bitcoin loses this level, you will care, or you will almost be in a position where you're forced to care. Just given the structure that we have here. I mean, we've talked about this. Is this potentially a high time frame reversal that we're putting in from this range? And if it is, how I have been saying, you really don't want to catch that knife, or really just be in a rush to catch that knife, because we're in deep water almost. We're not there yet, but we are very much, I think, in danger of being dragged out there fairly soon, quite frankly, based on the way that majors seem to be trading. Equities selling off today. The VIX continues to rise. I'll talk about that as well. But really, now that we're kind of using majors to contextualize where altcoins could be, let's talk about the king majors, right? Which have been ETH, they have been SOL. Holy cow, wow, SOL is selling off today. ETH, they have been SOL, they have been BNB. These are kind of our barometers for what that altcoin directionality looks like. Right now, we look at the context of ETH. Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. It doesn't look the best. Looks like we've accepted back into this high time frame cyclical range that we have effectively been trading in for almost 2 full years now, right? So we need to see, at the very least, I think, ETH reclaim this red circle, but really more so reclaim this previous range high that we might be deviating back into. Otherwise, I think it makes sense to eventually prospect a rotation down into range lows down here at 2K. And nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that. So I will once again harp on the importance of these levels on Bitcoin and ETH across the board. Man, it's Not great to be doing this video on Thursdays. I swear we just rip down all Thursday, every single Thursday, I swear. But there's also alpha to that, right? You know, if you trade day of the week return profiles, I guess going short the Asia pump that we had last night, probably, you know, behaviorally would have been a pretty good bet. Which brings us to things like Sol. I think Sol looks a lot worse than ETH, but here's what I will say. You know, I'm one who loves to beat the dead horse with Sol bearishness because I hate the chain. I hate a lot of what it's done to the altcoin space and to crypto as a whole. But I think Sol or underperformance against ETH is mostly finished. I think I talked about this a few weeks ago. I am kind of looking for some form of double bottom to get carved out here. We could absolutely trade into these lows, but as long as we don't break them, you know, I think that the bear market on Sol ETH, although it was very brief and it was great to trade specifically ETH to the long side. We did a signal with Snorlax back before the summer, kind of talking about how Sol ETH and really these other ETH pairs were communicating to us that ETH was kind of just like screaming bullishness before it made that huge like 150% move in just a few weeks. So now, as I'm going to say, as long as we don't break these lows on Sol ETH, I am expecting some form of double bottom to here. And there was, I guess you would say like the resumption of the high time frame uptrend. I don't think that you're making new highs imminently, but it could be something, you know, in like a year where if this is the low, then it would be very plausible to me to see Sol ETH make new highs again. So although I'm bearish on the Sol USD structure, I'm not necessarily bearish on the Sol ETH pair. And I think that says a lot, you know, as when we're looking at charts like others, when we're looking at charts like Total 3, Sol is kind of representative of that higher beta trade. And that's also why I think we've largely seen Sol trade pretty heavily correlated to Pepe, to the extent that, especially in September and after the summer rally, we saw Sol kind of top out at the same time as most of these large cap meme coins. So from that perspective, you know, I think Sol outperformance against ETH is eventually going to be your signal of when will be the optimal time to begin investing once again in these higher beta altcoins. Because I probably will strike a bearish slant on this show. I can't help it, guys. I have had a bearish bias on the market now for over a month, but you know, I am on a higher time frame, very bullish and optimistic about this adoption cycle within crypto continuing. So I want to be exposed to the coins that I would consider to be good tech, right? We say that almost kind of as a meme a lot, but I really do mean that. I believe in a lot of cryptographic technology. So like I said, we will be talking about one of those on this show today. I guess I can go into it, right? We can talk about Hyperliquid, which I've been kind of asking myself, is this going to be a double bottom within a larger vertical accumulation pattern, or is this potentially a shoulder that we're seeing form after potentially distribution? Now, if we are going to curl up from here, really that level for a market structure break at this point, it's pretty clear. It's like 48 to 50 bucks. You get a reclaim of that level. And I think you have no choice but to be extremely bullish on Hyperliquid tokens. Probably all the Hyperliquid beta as a byproduct of that. And if you break down, I would say below this pivot, you should be expecting, I would say, a complete fill of this wick. A complete fill of this wick. You're probably at that point trading down into here over the next few months, right? I don't quite know what timeline that would be. Hyperliquid is much stronger than most of the beta that I've seen today. I think that's at least optimistic for Hyperliquid holders. You want to ask me what my number one coin to buy on a dip is and has been and will continue to be? It's Hyperliquid, man. I think this is going to be a token where it's going to be like the most brain dead trade of next cycle. But a lot of people who might have bought too early and had conviction get shaken out in the same way that we saw with Solana in 2022 into 2023 and even 2024, right? Sol traded all the way to $8. A lot of people who bought it 30 bucks, 40 bucks, gave up on it. That's just kind of the nature of crypto. And then obviously you guys know how the rest panned out. It ended up pulling like another 30x from the bottom. So I think Hyperliquid will be that coin of of the next few years. I almost don't even want to think about crypto and as far as cycles go anymore. I think it's so misleading within the broader adoption cycle that we're seeing for crypto. But at the end of the day, yes, liquidity will dictate everything, and I don't want to. I don't want to like wash away that that's the case. But when we look at altcoins, what do I think is the most telling? I think it's BNB. Who had this parabolic rise. I told you guys last week, we got to hold this 10-10 wick to maintain a bullish posture on a higher time frame. Right now, I don't love the look of the way this asset is trading today, and really since we kind of bottomed, I think this was a weak bounce relative to things like ETH and Bitcoin, which we look at their structures. I think they bounced a lot more than BNB. So maybe there is still some issues as far as the plumbing underneath the crypto market goes. And that will be best illustrated, I think, continuously within the BNB chart. So we'll see what we get by the time I do this show next week. But you need to hold this wick, because contextually, what do you think is going to happen to altcoins who have not filled their 10-10 wick if the king altcoin or like the shitcoin casino does fill the wick? I would say it's only a matter of time before you get to follow through on other altcoins. But yeah, talking about some other alts, we can kind of go shotgun mode now, going through a few of these other assets. Zcash has obviously been hugely outperforming everything on the market, right? You can come up with fundamental reasons for why this is the case. I'm not as familiar with them. We do have some people in our Discord who have been all over that since the low. So I want to shout out them if they're watching this video. I also think some of it, you just had Grayscale announce today that they're going to be IPOing. This is a very big Grayscale holding. I'm sure that contributed at least a little bit to this pump. So obviously this coin has pumped quite a lot. Would I recommend buying at $500 after it is up like 20x off the lows? I don't know if I would say that. At the very least, I would tell you wait for more structure to form, because what you don't want to have happen is you had the parabolic move, you buy like the first or second dip, and then the dip keeps dipping. We all know this story with crypto. At the same time, I think if you can reclaim 525, 550 on Zcash, you absolutely open the door for another leg, because I think at that point, it looks less like a parabolic trend has broken and more like you've kind of reclaimed that before the next leg higher. I forgot who did this like simple trick on CT. It might have been like Trader XO or Trader SC. It's so simple. I like it for altcoins. You just draw 3 trend lines with increasing steepness, and it gives you a good idea for the trend's momentum. Honestly, it might have been like Ansem. I can't even remember, but I've always kind of liked this trick, which is kind of why I would also say, all right, well, if you're reclaiming, this 550 level, this market structure, maybe we can come back and at least, maybe we just get like, another high, and then it kind of fizzles out into a consolidation. But if you're reclaiming something like this, then obviously you're going to maintain the parabola. Otherwise, you have your downside levels where maybe you want to be a buyer here and you lose this level, you know where to cut bait, as that would signal that the trend has probably been lost. At least the momentum of the trend has been lost. Otherwise, we've had like these really freaky, and Uniswap falls under this category too. Filecoin, ICP, Uniswap have all gotten these like massive pumps out of nowhere. I don't quite know the reasoning why. Maybe, it's crypto, right? On any given day, it doesn't really need a reason for why it does anything. But when things like Filecoin and ICP are ripping like 100%, that does make me ask, like, all right, what the hell happened? Uniswap, easy for me to see why they turned on the basically the revenue sharing for token holders. But yeah, things like Filecoin and ICP, I don't quite know what to make of it. I know even less of what to make of it after they retrace the majority of the pump. Are these actually good coins? Are these just scam pumps? I think it's too early to deduce the answer to that question. But when we're talking about pure crime, I mean, we're talking about jelly, which I have on my watch list just because I find this chart to be so interesting. I have no idea what's going on with this, but it has been an altcoin outperformer, right? I mean, you could have bought here and made 8 to 9x within like a day. Wish that luck could find the coins that I still hold, but I guess that just won't be the case. Then just looking through some other altcoins, again, I don't want to be redundant. I think the picture for a lot of these altcoins is pretty clear, somewhat painted. It looks like we are breaking down from these kind of like slow grinding uptrends that we hoped would resolve higher. That doesn't mean necessarily that the cycle has to be over, but what it does tell us is that these altcoins, after the wipeout that we had over a month ago, I can't believe that was a month ago, they're going to require a longer refractory period before we are allowed to get super bullish on them again. And I think when you look at things like Total 2, when you look at things like Total DeFi, they look a little less bad than some of these larger cap altcoins that we've seen. And so I do find that a bit interesting. We could, in theory, just continue to do something like this, right? Where we just grind up into an inevitable parabola. I don't think that scenario should shock you either. But if these charts are going to be catching up to kind of what we've seen out of some other altcoins, like I think Doge is actually a great visual of this. We've had that slow grind up, the trend breaks. Is it over? Question mark. Are we about to see this sort of price action hit majors? That's kind of always been the question that I've been asking myself over the last few weeks. But obviously, some of it will come down to ETH BTC. For a long time, I've had this level marked out. And I think the macro low, I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin dominance today, because I know we have some other people who make YouTube videos about Bitcoin dominance fairly frequently. They do a great job with that. I don't need to cover it. I called the Bitcoin dominance top. I can't remember where it was, but it was basically like the highest risk reward point for me to do so. I promise I'm not LARPing when I say that. Go back and watch Signals with Snorlax. You'll find the video where I talk about it. I have kind of been asking myself, all right, are we going to see some form of like double bottom here? And the more I kind of think about it, the more I think that makes sense to me, where we do get maybe like a double bottom. I don't think that it will. I really don't think you're going to revisit these levels on ETH BTC. And as a byproduct of that, the inverse levels on Bitcoin dominance. Anything's possible. It's crypto. But I feel very confident that the macro bottom is in on ETH BTC and for and as a byproduct, again, the Bitcoin dominance macro top. But that's not to say that a return to kind of this structure, a double bottom, would be good for altcoins. Obviously, it would not be. And a lot of those charts are already kind of hurting. Lastly, I'll just touch on some equities here really briefly, and then I'm going to wrap up. But, equities have been chatting higher. This has, I think, been the push-pull that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. Is crypto weakness front-running an equities correction, or is equities strength inevitably going to drag crypto higher? And we still don't know the answer to that, right? We still don't know the answer to that. But the things that have consistently concerned me when we talk about these things and maintaining that bullish posture has been that liquidity is receding. I've talked about it every week for the last few weeks, probably to an extent that is maybe annoying. Probably very annoying, actually. So I won't talk about VIX futures. You're welcome. But I will talk about the VIX, which does have, I think, I don't even know if you'd call it like a trend, but it has been giving you kind of like this subtle grind higher. Are we going to get a headline? Is something about to happen? It really doesn't matter what it's going to be. It just matters that, all right, is the VIX in an uptrend? Yes. Is liquidity receding? Yes. Are we seeing liquidity sensitive sectors of the market beginning to show weakness? Yes. So it really doesn't matter what a headline would be, just that we're seeing the things that typically precede larger corrections and have preceded larger corrections for the last few years. So for me, I'm watching that. It matters for altcoins. It does. And I think we're finally seeing that reflected in IWM as well, which absolutely matters for altcoins, right? I guess it does make sense contextually that IWM is really struggling to breach this top that we set in 2021. And now I don't really know what to expect from the IWM from here, but at the end of the day, if we do reject here, I have to imagine it's probably not a good sign for altcoins. And it is probably, I think, a very definitive signal that we are just kind of front running a correction in equities. I think you can see this as well on Hood, which is the strongest small cap of the cycle. Look at this chart, man. Why did I ever invest in anything other than Robinhood? Quite frankly, I don't know. But here we are, showing us some weakness. We've seen on Robinhood multiple times throughout the cycle, this has given us 40 to 50% corrections and still maintained a broader uptrend. Could we be about to see that right now? Well, this is beginning to look increasingly distributive to me. So I'll probably be a dip buyer of Robinhood personally. Because when we talk about what is a high conviction small cap or altcoin that I want to hold for not just like a market cycle, but for years, it's Hyperliquid, it's Robinhood. Those are the first two that come to mind. And there's really not that much wiggle room. I think beyond that, you have a subjective element that your altcoin asset selection is going to vary widely. But I think what most people can recognize and will continue to recognize going forward and want to own, you want to own the casino. I do almost feel in a way that rhetoric has stretched very far, which I think brings up another good point, right? We're in this super cycle of crypto adoption. And I think probably like to the earlier stages of another tech bubble. I think that will take a long time to play out. But like, that's just kind of my dubious speculation. We have these constant periods where we try to price in like a decade worth of optimism. And that's usually when the market will look to correct. At the very least, that's kind of how things have functioned over the last like 15 to 16 months. So that's kind of how I'm viewing the market correction that we're seeing right now. And it absolutely could continue, right? Especially when we look at kind of the things that we discussed like 2 or 3 minutes ago. But yeah, I'm optimistic at the very least on Robinhood, on Hyperliquid, on a higher time frame. I am a dip buyer. I'm not a buyer at these prices, obviously, as I think prices will likely continue to slide. But on the topic of altcoins, on small caps, those are my two biggest picks. And obviously, if we want to flip back to risk on to kind of wrap things up, you want to see you have some work to do, right? But you need to see some market structure breaks. I would really say on kind of those early November consolidations that we put in right before this recent leg down, that to me would prove that this is all right. This is probably manipulation. This is probably a deviation. We're going higher. And if that does not happen, I'm going to assume that Bitcoin has lost this level, this structure here, and that we're about to nuke very, very hard. So sorry to end the video on a bit of a negative note. We've done it again. The market is red. Well, I do one of my signals with Snorlaxes, but hopefully at the very least, guys, you enjoyed the content. You took some helpful information to be able to apply it to your trading, positioning, etc. But thanks again for tuning in. A reminder that I do these every single Thursday. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you haven't already. But until next week, guys, thank you again. And especially now, stay safe, guys, please. Stay safe.